Our next guest here, live from Brisbane in Queensland for ANZPAC, is Evie Morgan. Evie is a family dispute resolution practitioner, child inclusive practitioner, and a parenting coordinator. So you work with parents pre, during, and after when we look at these separated family situations.
Yes.
Evie, you've got quite a bit of experience in negotiating the outcomes that are best for the family and the child. Can I start by asking you, I'm assuming that you will see aspects of parental alienation, but let's start by defining what is parental alienation from your perspective?
Absolutely. So, parental alienation is generally a behavior from one parent that is aimed to disrupt or throw out the window the relationship between the child and the other parent. So, I guess for me, that is pure parental alienation. What that doesn't consider is the fact that there's also, on that scale, there's also child rejection. So there's rejection, the child may reject one parent, and that's not necessarily alienation. So alienation is a set of behavior that is like targeted, and it's not based on the child's organic lived experience. Whereas rejection may be, when we unpack it, there may have been an incident or a set of little things that the child perceives as that parent being perhaps unsafe emotionally or physically, or perhaps they perceive the other parent as therefore the more stable parent or the more dominant parent, and then they can gravitate towards that parent.
So what I've just heard you say is you see a range.
Yes.
Okay. So based on that, Evie, what's your position on parental alienation?
So I would probably challenge you there. It's certainly not my position on parental alienation. I would say that it's the child's position on parental alienation, um, and perhaps my position in advocating for the child.
Okay, well, let's go to that.
Okay. So the child's lived experience remains the same. So whether the rupture has been driven by one parent, and sometimes that either that, let's call it the alienating parent, the alienating parent is either very intentional in their actions, or they are unintentionally unable to psychologically remove their feelings around their adult relationship. They can't remove their idea of that from the child's idea of their relationship with the other parent. So they then unintentionally or intentionally poison that relationship for their own emotional needs. So that's the kind of stuff we can challenge. Realistically, though, the lived experience for that child is the same. So whether it's intentional or non intentional, there's a rupture in their work. And the effect for that child is still they're confused, they're caught in the crossfire, and they don't understand why. So I guess my stance on parental alienation is actually about how can we support this child in their crossfire, because the crossfire doesn't just stop. Really what we're unpacking is what is their experience? Why are they feeling that way? What are they trying to keep themselves safe from? And is one parent or both parents putting a load on the child that is not theirs to bear?
When you talk about load, we've heard the term before, enmeshment. Is that what we're talking about?
It can be. A lot of the time it is. It can also be loyalty binds. So really, children are very intuitive. And a lot of the time, and I guess we see this a lot with domestic and family violence as well, children can gravitate towards the stronger parent for their own sense of protection, but they may also gravitate to the other parent, and particularly in alienation matters as well. Um, I'm feeding off your fear. I'm feeding off your emotional needs. So I'm going to hone in and I'm going to look after you because you can't do it for yourself. Um, so a lot of the time we see this really intense sense of loyalty that is intentionally or unintentionally fed by one parent. And I guess the question that we ask there, I guess in my practice, I'm really mindful not to simply just say, well, this looks like alienation and therefore it is alienation. I very rarely use the term alienation because it's actually the child's experience. It's not just a blanket term, it's not just a buzzword. Your child is caught in the crossfire. So, what I am then looking for is are you able to prioritize your love for the child over your hatred of the other parent? Where we can work with that, we can work with this. So I guess some of the tools that we use are our bear cards. So I'm really aware the cards online are different to these ones, but so we as parents think we want our kids to look like this, happy and content. Where children have two homes, it can be really difficult for this. So just the notion of having two homes can be a bit unsettling. And unless mums and dads work really well together, they communicate well, they're on the same page, no one's undermining each other, they're okay. They're okay, they're good, they're happy. Both parents can come to their soccer games, they're sweet. One of the questions that we will ask in a child inclusive process is, how do you feel when you know that mum and dad are going to see each other? So how do you feel at changeover, for instance? And these are cards that we have pulled out recently with these questions. So a sense of anxiety, a sense of pressure, a sense of, I don't know how to approach dad at changeover when mum is there, because I don't know if that's going to upset my relationship or my relationship with dad. How do I manage my loyalties?
You talk about that loyalty bind
Yeah.
that they have. When you're doing this sort of work with a child, do they show that to you straight away, or do they have to build trust before that comes out?
Absolutely. Yeah. So if it was that easy, children would tell anyone that they feel loyal to one parent and not the other. How are they to articulate that when they don't really understand that? That a lot of the children, like a lot of these children, are 10 and younger. They don't have the emotional vocab to be able to articulate that. I feel anxious at changeover because I'm worried about mum seeing me happy to see dad is actually going to hurt her feelings.
Our last speaker, Corey, talked about parents and their voice. What I'm hearing from you is the voice of the child, which is often not heard enough. We had a barrister previously who said we should be more of the voice of the child.
Mm-hmm.
How much pressure do you see on children in the middle of these? And you said a scale or a range on parental alienation, where extremes and mild.
Yeah.
What's that pressure like? We don't get to hear this from the children.
It can, so often we will see, I wouldn't say often, sometimes we will see children who the tension or the hatred between both parents has become so overwhelming that they will refuse to go to the other parent. And it is you know, technically it's not alienation, it's refusal. I'm refusing because I am so overwhelmed right now. I am so unheard. I am like, you're you literally you see these children and moms throwing these barbs at dad or dad's throwing these barbs at mom, but the only thing that goes through is your child. So every pot shot that you're taking at the other parent goes through your kid. But the overarching goal for parents is in that instance is to just maintain their ground. But what about the child? So I'm really mindful not to just throw the term alienation around. What I'm mindful of is why is the child feeling like this? And how can this look differently? But do the parents have capacity to turn this around?
So I'm hearing you describe behaviours of the parents, some behaviours of the child, the emotion of the child, which is that missing voice. Um, Before we look at what changes, can I get you to put your mediator hat on? When you have two parents who may have that hatred towards each other and there is an impact happening on the child, how do you navigate that in mediation?
So again, bear cards, I mean, they're a very cute tool, but they're a very useful tool. And we use lots of other tools, particularly in our child inclusive process. Um, to be very clear, we will not consider child inclusive process if it is clear to us that either parent does not have the capacity to take on the feedback of that child without them recognizing that feedback. So, for example, if we were to give mom or dad feedback that says, your child feels like this every time you talk about the other parent, if they don't have the capacity not to then say to that child, why did you say that? Why would you say that I make you sad? We're not going to run child inclusive. But we might still use bear cards in mediation to make sure that every aspect of that mediation is future focused and child focused. Um, Another tool that I will use where we haven't seen the child or the children is to ask each parent to bring their favourite photo of their child and leave it in the middle of the table. So each time we start to get off track, each time it starts to be, hang on a minute, are you in ex-partner mode or are you in co-parent mode? We'll put back to that. There's lots of dramatic tools that I use, like rocks in a basket. But the outcome is always, well, the goal is always the same. The goal is I actually don't care about your adult bullshit. What I do care about is the voice of your child through this. And how is what you're doing here, these conversations that you're having, how is that actively in the best interest of your child and their right to feel loved by both parents?
Wow. And for what it's worth, we recently heard the former federal circuit court judge who will do the same. He will ask both parents to bring photo of the children to keep it personal and keep it focused.
Yeah.
It's interesting to hear you talking about that in mediation as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
Evie, there's so many questions and comments coming through that we need to get to in a moment. But if we take a step back, what changes are needed?
Okay. I think we need to drop the buzzwords. Parental alienation is a real thing, and it is a real thing that has incredibly serious and long-term impacts for everyone who is involved. I think we need to start giving more scope to that. We need to start acknowledging that sometimes there is a rupture for a reason, and part of my job is to help bring that forward. So if either parent or one parent is not aware of why the child may feel a certain way and how that has then snowballed, I want to make sure that everyone has all the information so that everyone can work at the same pace. Um, The simple fact is that alienation or rejection, the outcome for the child is still the same. The child still feels caught in the crossfire. The child still feels like, how can I be completely loved if I'm one person, but I'm actually half mum and half dad? If mum doesn't respect dad, then how could she respect that half of me? And vice versa. So labeling something unnecessarily can be quite damaging to the progress that we can make. If we can look at it from a spectrum, that then gives us a spectrum of interventions that we may be able to scaffold.
We've got several guests online, and a percentage of them are parents and a percentage of them are professionals. The question, I suppose, is what can our attendees do? What's something practical that any of us can do? And I'm going to focus this around the child. You just open up a whole new world.
So I understand. I'm a parent. I understand all of the emotion and the guilt and the highs and the lows that comes with that. But I guess hacking on to what Corey was saying earlier, it really is about how can you find ways to not add fuel to the fire. And that doesn't feel good. Sometimes it just feels really crappy to know that someone's throwing rocks at you and you're not going to throw them back. But not only are you not going to throw them back and be uh, okay with it, you're actually going to not throw them back and focus your energy on the child. So you're not just turning your back to the rocks, you're actually turning completely away from the rocks and focusing all of that love and that positive intimacy that is not over here, you're focusing it on your child. So your child should feel that regardless of the war that's raging, there's not always two opposing sides. There might just be a war on one side. And the more you step out of that, the more you starve that fire of oxygen, the easier it gets for your child, even minutely.
And I'm sure that hurts so many of our parents that are going through this in the short term. I'm going to add one more question there. Did the children notice that? Did they notice the
Absolutely.
parent that's not fueling the fire?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think for that parent to so actively step out of that fire, it can sometimes feel like defeat, which is incredibly hard for us to do. But we see it time and time and time again. And our kids genuinely do see a shift. Our kids are able to see that mum, for example, says nasty things about dad, or when we talk about dad in our home, mum tells us to be quiet, or she rolls her eyes, or whatever it might be. But when they're not seeing that in the other home, particularly if they have seen that previously, they see that shift as in like night and day. And that's when we start to see those little drips and drabs of rebuild.
And we've had other experts talk about critical thinking with young children. I'm wondering if that's where it starts to develop when they get to the difference that you've just described in two homes.
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes it really is just about planting the seed of a different narrative. And it's not about sitting your child down and being like, well, what your mother says, that's rubbish. But really, it's stepping out and allowing that child to, as they develop their critical thinking skills, to really look at things as a whole spectrum. You don't need to be active in running the other parent's narrative down, because that actually just looks like you're stepping right back into the fire.
So, in summary, for our professionals and our parents, we talk about in the child's best interest, but I think I'm hearing you say, not put fuel on the fire, don't throw the rocks back, but focus double down on focusing on the child will notice that, even if there's no contact at that time.
Yep, yep. And it's really hard for us to be, it's kind of like um, learning a new language but never getting to practice it. You don't actually know how well you're doing or how well that is being received if you're not seeing your kid. So I completely acknowledge that. And I completely acknowledge how disempowering that can feel. Um, and I'm not saying not to access all of the support and the avenues that are available, but stepping out of that direct fire for that child is the most empowering thing that you can do for your child.
I'm wondering if any of our audience would actually contemplate that the gift that they give. It's a painful gift for some of our parents to have to do it, and
Terrific.
the professionals that are supporting as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Evie, thank you, and thank you for the challenge actually in turning that around to the perspective of the child, that this is what they're feeling, this is what they're going through. When we've been focused on the parents, you've actually given us an insight into what it's like for the child in the middle. And it could be on that range from mild to extreme.
Yeah.
But refocusing it's on our efforts as parents.
Which is a really hard space. I acknowledge that. I also think, I guess while we're talking about changes, and I'll get off my high horse pretty quickly, but I am really, really passionate about the need for change within the court system. So orders that come from the court need to be thoughtful in the space of, we can't rush to push reunification without actually thinking, how practical is this? What are the step by steps? How are we actually going to support the child to want to engage? Because the child has put in all of these coping strategies and all of these things to keep them safe. And a court order is saying, throw it out the window and just get on with it. So I think thoughtful order making really needs to be front and center, because that's actually going to look at how are each parent going to be held accountable in how active they're supporting the child to engage, and what does that actually look like, and how can we manage that moving forward.
Evie, thank you for giving us such a different insight on what this looks like. We're going to take some questions live from the audience online and in the room, and I can see they are flooding in. So we've opened up I think a great Pandora's box to have an open conversation, because we don't get to do this enough. So thank you for your insight, but actually thank you for giving us insights to the child. We haven't gone there to that degree. For our audience in the room and our audience online, please use the link in the chat or the QR code in the room to submit your questions and your comments. I'm going to do my best to get through all of them, because there's quite a few coming through. Evie, stay with me in the hot seat here. We'll see if we can address these from your perspective. And I hear that you're coming from a perspective of accountability of the parents to be focused on the child.
Yes.
That's what I really heard. We have a professional online here in Australia who's asked, if mediation was designed to avoid court that lacks teeth to compel a difficult parent, what specifically needs to change from your perspective?
So I think we're perhaps stepping into, I guess, the aftercare. I think mediation, if done really well and out, sometimes perhaps outside of the standard process, if you're able to slow that down and really engage well with both parents, you're more likely able to challenge the behavior without seemingly challenging the parent themselves. So in order to challenge the behavior but build the parent up, you have greater likelihood of shifting to, do you love your kid more than you hate the other parent? Because 9.9 out of 10 are going to say, yeah, absolutely. I love my kid. Of course I love my kid. So there's scope there for real change. In saying that, sometimes court is the best option for some families. What I think can have teeth in a non-court process is probably parental coordination, where it's kind of like that aftercare, but it's aftercare that doesn't have the same um, level of confidentiality that mediation does. So parental coordination will really, it's about holding parents accountable the whole way through. So you're holding parents accountable. Okay, you said that changeover was on a Saturday, but then, the kid didn't want to go. Why didn't the kid want to go? How active were you? What did you actually do to encourage the child to go? How did you talk up the other parent? What did all of your steps look like? But the key there is that it is able to be reported straight back to court. That's actually really effective when there's interim orders in place because you get to final orders and then there's a very clear pattern of behaviour that's then addressed.
But you were saying before aftercare, but I've just heard you say that parental coordination through interim orders before they get to final orders, because then that can show a third party perspective on the behaviours that are actually happening.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, and because I'm a mediator, I see parental coordination very much as like the aftercare step from mediation. And it can absolutely be interim orders or it can be final orders where parental coordination is put in those orders. But it really is such a good opportunity to hone those new skills. You're learning a new language. You've gone from hating the other parent to all of a sudden you have to have a collegial relationship with the other parent. And JD, you might not like everyone that you work with, but you still have to be polite. You
Yeah.
still have to engage respectfully. You still have a common goal. And pardon the pun, but that's the business of parenting.
Yeah.
So that's why you're there.
And getting them to work together.
Yeah.
Right.
And that can be like learning a new skill. It's like learning to drive a car. You have to practice and practice and practice. But at least you can practice with a little bit of support.
Okay. Thank you. Our next question is coming from, hello from San Francisco, so coming from the US.
Oh.
Thank you for joining us. Awesome discussion. How do mediators get difficult parents to understand the impact of their behaviours on kids in Australia?
Okay. Well, personally, I get quite dramatic. So I have some pretty effective metaphors that I use. So, for example, I will often get two parents who very much do not like each other. I get them into the same room because their children deserve to see them in the same room, figuratively, not in person. And we might hold a basket, and I will literally peg rocks into that basket. This is that time you said that dad was an arsehole. Throw it in there. And over and over and over again until the basket is too heavy to hold. So that's your child. That is your child carrying the load of your emotional baggage. Start taking it out. So I think there's some really cool practical things that you can do. In saying that, there are absolutely some families who you just cannot move. And in those families, court is the best option. And there's a lot of room for improvement within the court space, but they are also doing the best that they can. And for some families, that's the right space for them.
Yeah. Okay. Potentially one of your colleagues, a professional online, has said, "Thank you, Evie, for sharing your expertise and wisdom. This is very, very helpful." We do have a professional online from New Zealand who said, "Do mediators generally understand parental alienation, and what's their typical response to this issue?"
No, most mediators do not really understand parental alienation as a whole. Individually, mediators may understand the spectrum of, well, they may understand the term alienation, but do they understand the spectrum? Do they understand that there's reasonable rejection? Do they understand that a child may have seen A, B, and C, and they may have been very minor little things, but in the child's mind, that has blown up into something completely different. And that seed has then perhaps been watered by the other parent. So, alienation is not something that I think there is enough training around for practitioners. Um, when I say that mediators don't understand alienation, I want to be really clear. Absolutely, as individuals, we have our own radar, we have our own gut feel, we have our own lived experiences. So, as individuals, absolutely, I'm sure some people really have their finger on the pulse. Is there a blanket training that addresses it? Not really.
Okay. And within Australia, family dispute resolution practitioners have to go through qualification training under the Attorney General's department, but I'm hearing that's not, this area is not addressed.
Well, particularly so for child inclusive training, it's sort of touched on, but it's it's very easy to misidentify. It can be something that is very quick to go, okay, well, that sounds like alienation. But actually, if we unpack that further and further and further, is there a perceived sense of one parent is not emotionally as safe as the other, and why? So that's the kind of stuff that we really need to unpack. We're also needing to look at, is this intentional, or is this just the other parent's emotional baggage, and they're displacing their emotions around the adult relationship to that of the child's relationship with the other parent. So there's so many nuances that I don't think the hard and fast training can actually cover. It really is around individual practitioners' desire to learn more, coupled with their own experiences.
And we're doing the New Zealand Australia thing. One of our Australian online attendees has just said fantastic advice. You know, straight forward. So thank you. We have our next question from within Australia. This is like an individual or a parent affected by parental alienation online. Previously, this conference presented some research showing that parental alienation often has a preceding history of physical or psychological domestic violence. Do mediators take this into account?
Absolutely. So, as mediators, we will always screen for the presence of historical or current domestic and family violence. What did conflict actually look like? So, outside of domestic and family violence, what's your conflict style? What has the child seen? Um, how did you address that when the child did see this? Did you recognize that the child saw this? Um, have there been any mental health issues or drug and alcohol issues historically that have perhaps scared the child or showed the child a perceived or real side of you that was perhaps not as safe as they needed to feel? So we're looking at that. We're also looking at, how does that impact the other parent? Is the other parent acting on a perceived risk factor for the child? Or is the other parent actually just, they haven't quite addressed their own emotional stuff around how they were treated in the relationship, or what that dynamic looked like? So they're all things that we take into consideration as we're building that big picture. But when I say that, we're not just building a big picture for that 1 hour that we spend with each parent. What we're doing is we're pinpointing parts that we want to unpack further. And we will unpack and unpack and unpack until the cows come home. Because if we can't understand this as a holistic, where is this coming from? Where is this barrier to getting an agreement actually coming from? Because we can band-aid it. We can try and massage these agreements, but 3 weeks later, when they all fall to the wayside,
What's the point?
What's the point? So unless we can actually really try and scaffold lasting change, you're going to be back, come back and back and back. And we want to either structure that or we want to address the core issue from the get-go.
Yeah, okay. We have one of our audience here in the room said, is it true that the child can reject the alienated parent in order to protect themselves from further harm from the alienator? How can we support the child through this?
Yeah, that is true. So that's a fight or flight response at its core. So that's the child going, this is not going to end well for me. If I continue to show that I want to love the other parent and that I enjoy spending time with the other parent, it's not going to end well. And we as humans are built to self-preserve. So that's your little person who they're not just something that goes between homes. They are their own little human. That's your little human saying, I need to find ways to protect myself. And if that means pushing someone else out because my primal need for survival is coming first here, then I would do that.
That doesn't mean that don't love the parent.
It absolutely, it means that, and it sort of comes back to when we ask parents, well, do you love your child more than you hate the other parent? Do you love yourself more? Are you able, like, how important is your survival? Because even cavemen knew that survival was paramount. So that's where that stems from, in my experience. What I think, as gut wrenching and soul destroying as it can be to be that parent who is pushed away, I have seen things turn around when children are at a point where they're able to have a little bit of distance from that parent themselves. So that might be when they start to form their own relationships. They might be 16, 17, and having their own relationship experiences and seeing that there's nuances there, seeing that not everything's black and white. And it also might give them a bit of a buffer from the young parent, where they're able to sit back and critically look at the situation.
There's that critical thinking again.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I think the best thing to do there is simply to look after your own emotions as that other parent. Keep yourself well, lean into your support, and take opportunities to show the child that you will always be there without them feeling a sense of obligation to take up that offer. So sometimes that might be as simple as sending an occasional text message that doesn't show that there's a need for reply. So, hey mate, hope you're well, hope you're still enjoying footy. Even without a question mark, a child might read that and go, oh, mum wants to engage with me. It may be as simple as, hey, always here for you when you need. There's no need to respond. The message is clear. I'm here for you when you need. That is it. And just every now and again, the child just knows that the child will feel this huge sense of guilt. So the child may want to reconnect with dad when they're 19, but how do I reconnect with a parent who I have hurt so much? Because I'm just a little person, really, and I never wanted to hurt anyone. And I've made some decisions. They haven't made any decisions, they are just protecting themselves. But I've done some things to keep myself safe that have really hurt the other parent. How do I engage without feeling like I need to explain myself? Because I don't even know where to start. So I think for the other parent who has felt that rejection or who is going through that or is on the outside, it's simply a matter of being there for if and when the child is ready and finding ways to show that to the child.
Interesting. We've got a parent here in the room that is that sometimes separate homes are better than a DV or toxic home.
100%.
that ties back to that safety factor that you're talking about. And you said survival, like that brings it home for children and all of this, that they're in survival mode.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. We have another parent online here in Australia who's commented saying, thank goodness someone understands the damage this is doing to a child. In my case, because of the other parent avoiding addressing some mental health concerns for over 40 years. So please keep your comments and your questions coming through. We're trying to allow everyone to be heard as best we can here. We have another parent, Evie, who's saying, after years of trying to get my partner to attend counselling, mediation, or therapy, the only thing she's agreed to was dispute resolution, and it looked like it's a tick box exercise. Do you see that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Unfortunately, you can't make someone do something that they don't want to do. And it may be a tick the box exercise. What personally my hope is that even when someone does engage just to say that they've done it, the right practitioner to the right person, and we all mesh differently with different people, but the right practitioner can build someone up enough to feel like they're not going to be judged, and then very, very subtly throw in some bits and pieces that hopefully that parent may pick up and may go home and think about. You may never see that. You may never see a change, but it may mean that your child sees a change.
And straight on the back of that, I just want to acknowledge one of our audience here in the room, a parent saying being the bigger person in the separation is a difficult task, but it's costing the time of the child.
Absolutely.
It's that lost time.
Yeah.
Evie, we have another question from here live in Brisbane. Are mediators trained in cluster B type personality disorders?
Not specifically, no. To be a mediator, you need to have a bachelor's degree, usually in either law or social sciences. And what social sciences encompasses is usually a fair bit of training around mental health and cluster A, cluster B. And then you need to then go on and do a specialist course in family dispute resolution. So depending on the background of your FDRP, they may have a really good awareness of different personality types. Even outside of specific training, as adults, we all have our own lived experiences and we all pick up tools along the way, whether it's formal training or not. So because you might have an FDRP who has a war background, but they've also been around the traps for a very long time. They understand human behavior, and sometimes they will understand human behavior better than someone who has a master's degree in human behavior. It really is it's a bit of a lucky dip, really, but I think you're also in a position where you're able to ask those questions of those practitioners. What is your background? What is your degree?
Before you engage.
Before you engage. Outside of that, you can just get a feel of who you're engaging with before you decide whether or not to continue if you're party A. So to answer your question, as a blanket, there's no specific training that I'm aware of as part of any specific family dispute resolution practitioner qualification. But your FDRP may have formal qualifications before that.
Thank you. I'm going to do my best to squeeze in a few more comments and questions here. We've got a parent here joining us in Brisbane in the room that said, I don't hate the other parent. I hate the court process. I hate being accused of false allegations. I hate when I went broke fighting for access to my daughter.
Yeah. And I hate that for you. Like, genuinely, it's a horrific space to be in. And I completely understand how some days it can feel like a lost cause. I think it's really important in acknowledging that I'm also able to acknowledge that where there is support available, like dads in distress, your friends, just really, like Corey was saying, some days you sit down, you have a coffee, you chat about it, and you feel a little bit lighter. It doesn't fix the situation, doesn't actually change the lay of the land, but it helps you feel a little less isolated. So as shitty as that situation is, I really just I cannot encourage you enough to really just engage and lean into your supports.
Thank you, Nick. We have a professional online who has asked, how do you manage high conflict parenting when one parent is just stuck in bitterness and resentment?
Sometimes you can't manage it. Like, that's the short answer. Um, More often than not, personally, I would have multiple sessions with each, like, yeah, I could have up to 5 sessions with each parent prior to mediation and really just try to throw that back to the child. What's your child's experience? Tell me a time where you saw your child. What was the last time your child, when was the last time your child cried? What was that about? Do you think that that was disproportionate to the event? Why do you think that might have been? So I guess really just trying to break that down. And sometimes it is as simple as saying, like, when you cannot get through to them, I actually don't care what you think. I care that you can see your child's perspective. So can we have a transparent conversation? Like, can we just call it what it is, lay it on the table? Where are we at? And unfortunately, if that means that that parent disengages, then so be it. It wasn't going to get anywhere anyway.
And the coming back to the child is really what we're hearing.
Yeah.
It's get out of our own way as the parents or whoever dealing with this and get back to the child. That's what's really coming through. This is a comment from online. This has been absolutely fantastic forum. Thank you so much to everyone involved. Thank you for being so straight up about this evening. I'm going to sneak a couple more questions if I can. My daughter, this is from online. My daughter is 1.5 and I can see that her being happy around me upsets the other parent. How do you address that?
Okay. So generally, there's two things that drive resistance in mediation. And one of them is fear. And sometimes it's that emotional fear of being replaced. And it really is as simple as like tapping into that for that other parent. How do you feel when Sophie sees dad? And really unpacking, like, what does that feel like for you? Why does it feel like that? Every little girl needs their mom, and every little girl needs their dad. And how can we balance that out? Because I understand that it particularly as a mum, and this is what I'd be saying to mum, um, particularly as a mum, it's really hard to say why to our little kid when, we grew that baby and we are so attached, but knowing that that child comes back. So really sort of putting that into perspective in terms of like, it hurts you to say goodbye to your child, but this isn't you being replaced by the other parent. This isn't because Sophie has so much fun with dad that what you have to offer, even if you're not the fun parent, is still equally as important. And really just balancing out that understanding of attachment.
Thank you. We've got a comment from one of the parents here in the room in Brisbane. As an adult, you are responsible for holding space for your child, regardless of if or when they reach out to you outside of the other parent's control.
Yes, you are responsible to hold space. How you do that in a way that does not lead the child to feel pressure to the point of pushing back is it's entirely your call because you are the expert in your family.
We've heard you say that before, that when you start with parents, you always start with you are the expert.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm going to squeeze in one last question if I can, and this is from within the room, and because it's focused on the child. When the other parent's behaviour isn't deemed DV, but is emotionally manipulative and controlling, what can be done about this to support the child?
I guess that, well, I guess there's room for context there in terms of, is this emotionally manipulative behavior directed at the child or directed at the parent, um, or directed at both inadvertently. I think in that space, all you can do is do your best to support the child with all the supports that are available. And sometimes that doesn't feel like enough, but what else can you do? I think it really is about making sure that the child has outlets that are available to the child that are confidential, that the child's the child is aware that one parent is not engaging in the fire. One parent is not throwing matches and and petrol on the bonfire that already is their life. Um, One parent is stepping back and starving that fire of oxygen whilst still engaging. When I say stepping back away from the fire, I don't mean leaving your kid and saying like, sayonara, I'll see you when you're 25. What I mean is stepping back enough to show the child that you're not engaging. You've got your white flag, and that child then knows that you are a safe person. And regardless of the pressure that that child gets from the other parent, they still know that they can come to you without fear of judgment.
We do need to wrap up. I want to thank everybody online and here live in Brisbane. Evie, thank you so much for the insight. I'm sitting here looking at these bear cards going, wow, that's
Oh my goodness.
a whole other level of perspective of the child in the middle. And I appreciate you taking us there. Thank you for your time, and there's still comments coming through saying thank you so much for just being so straight about this and giving us an insight. So, Evie, thank you.
You're welcome.
And to
Can I
our
just say one last
Sure.
thing? So this is one of my latest bear cards. This is a cranky bear. And a bit of context, when this particular child pulled out this card, I can't remember the exact words that they used, but it really made me think, and it made me think that I want to see a system that doesn't treat children as evidence, but actually treats children as people who have feelings and experiences, and that those feelings are valid, regardless of the fact that we have a system that currently has such a high focus on two parents.
Well, let's end it on that note. Thank you. That was of high value. If you got value out of this today, please join us again next month on the 28th of August. We'll be live from Adelaide in South Australia. Let's just say our next guest, probably more bigger picture and looking at what we can actually do to affect change and what change is happening at a legislative level. I'll leave it at that. But thank you to everyone online. Thank you to the audience here in Brisbane. And Evie, thank you so much
You're very
for
welcome.
giving us voice to the child today. That was fantastic. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you again at the next ANZPAC event. Please go to anzpac.org to find out more details about all of our speakers, recordings of these sessions, and to book your tickets for the next event. Thank you.